A ship stands in a port on the Black Sea in the Soviet Union. It's being loaded with troops and military equipment. The captain boards. He holds a letter in his hand. He's not to open the letter until he reaches the Atlantic Ocean. He doesn't know the final destination of the ship. He'll find that out when he opens the letter. The mission is completely secret. The ship is overcrowded. It's carrying 4 times the number of men it was built for.
Just 8 months after the confrontation in Berlin, the Soviet nuclear arsenal is on the move to Cuba. I'm Max Kennedy.
And I'm Nina Khrushcheva.
This is The Bomb, Episode 3, Gamble. Why does Khrushchev send Soviet nuclear missiles to Cuba? And how does he get them there? It's a huge undertaking. To an island on the other side of the world, ruled by a revolutionary guerrilla leader who is ruthless, impetuous, and unpredictable.
To understand the relationship between Nikita Khrushchev and Fidel Castro, we need to go back to Harlem, New York, in the early fall of 1960.
The Teresa Hotel is the tallest building in Harlem. With a striking, bright white, ornamental facade, it towers over its neighbors. But it stands out for other reasons. Central Harlem is 96% African American. The giant white hotel is a center of African American culture. But the building is surrounded by tenements, high crime, high unemployment, and a population subject to a racist police force. Harlem in 1960 highlights the greatest failures of capitalism in the United States: racism and economic injustice. The hotel lobby is small, crowded. On the evening of September 19th, a tall man wearing camouflage military gear marches in. His thick, full beard is dark, covering his cheeks and chin completely. It stands out even more than his battle fatigues. Everyone stares. The new guest at the Teresa Hotel is Fidel Castro. He and his entourage have been forced out of their plush hotel in Midtown after refusing to pay a gigantic cash deposit for their rooms. But civil rights activist and Harlem resident Malcolm X makes the arrangements for the Cuban delegation to stay at the Teresa Hotel instead. Castro is in New York for the United Nations General Assembly in September 1960. He'll make history while he's there, when he gives a speech that lasts for 4 hours and 29 minutes, still the longest oration in UN history.
Desde luego que para el señor presidente de los Estados Unidos,
it has been a year since Castro led the revolutionaries to victory in Havana, overthrowing the corrupt Batista regime. He's still young, in his mid-30s. He's shunned by Eisenhower and not invited to a lunch meeting of his fellow Latin American leaders.
Nikita Khrushchev is also in New York for the UN General Assembly. Castro tells him about his humiliating treatment, and in solidarity, Khrushchev goes to greet the Cuban rebel at the Teresa Hotel up in Harlem. They're photographed in front of the hotel by the press. Castro towers above my great-grandfather and gives him a bear hug. It's a perfect piece of political theater for both men, together, shining a light on the inequality in America's greatest city.
Khrushchev is good friend, good Cuban friend.
Khrushchev liked your speech.
Wonderful person. Wonderful and sympathetic. Very sympathetic.
Castro's plane is confiscated as he leaves the United States. and Khrushchev provides a Soviet aircraft for him to get back to Cuba. At the end of the trip, he talks to American reporters.
What do you want that we do? You leave us without petroleum. Khrushchev, give petroleum. You leave us without sugar. Khrushchev, buy sugar. Here, your leaders speak about aggression to Cuba. Khrushchev speak about defending Cuba. Khrushchev is friend.
Fidel, are you a communist, Fidel?
Well,
Castro reminds Khrushchev of the early days of the Russian Revolution. I mean, the Russian Revolution is now more than 50 years old. It's sort of developed a kind of lethargy to it. But the Cuban Revolution is still in the romantic phase. And Castro has this long beard, he dresses up in a flak jacket, and all that reminds Khrushchev of the early days of the Bolshevik Revolution, when he, Khrushchev, was sort of running around also in military gear. So, it sort of rekindles Khrushchev's revolutionary idealism, and certainly that is part of the bond between him and Fidel.
That hug in Harlem is backed up by economic support, a Save Cuba package to Comrade Castro in April 1962, exactly a year after Cuba repelled an American invasion force at the Bay of Pigs. Khrushchev is convinced that the island is still under threat, that the Americans are coming for Castro and the now communist regime on its doorstep.
If Khrushchev thinks the United States is coming for the Cuban regime, he's right.
Cuba is 90 miles from the coast of Florida. And if we're going to have a communist foothold in Cuba, if the Soviet Union has a close ally that close to America's shores, it's a problem for us. And we should try, by some means, to bring about a change in government.
The first attempt to overthrow Castro with the Bay of Pigs invasion fails.
Castro inflicts a huge, embarrassing defeat on the United States. But that's not the end of the struggle as far as the Kennedys are concerned.
My father, Robert F. Kennedy, joins a commission investigating the failures on the United States side, headed by General Maxwell Taylor. They get on so well that I'm named Maxwell Taylor Kennedy. They agree that having a hostile communist power 90 miles off of Florida is not acceptable. After the Taylor Commission publishes its report, Robert Kennedy says, "We will take action against Castro. It might be tomorrow, it might be in 5 days or 10 days, or not for months, but it will come."
The Kennedys are looking around for other ways of getting rid of Castro, and it's then that they start planning a campaign of sabotage against him, which they call Operation Mongoose.
Robert Kennedy takes a strong interest in Operation Mongoose, a secret campaign to undermine communism in Cuba. He makes a note in a meeting. "My idea is to stir things up on the island with espionage, sabotage, general disorder, run and operated by Cubans themselves."
He holds weekly or fortnightly meetings at the Justice Department in Washington to decide how to advance Operation Mongoose, using so-called dissidents in Cuba to undermine the Cuban regime.
There were a lot of Cuban exile groups, so trying to organize them, funding their counter-revolutionary activities, helping them conduct sabotage operations to weaken the Cuban economy. Operation Mongoose leaves the Cuban leadership feeling very exposed, very much under threat, and it also includes plans for a potential second invasion. Since the Bay of Pigs invasion had been such a huge failure, they decided they needed more preparation to weaken the Cuban government ahead of time.
It's not the happiest side of Bobby Kennedy's career that he's running these operations. He's not running them. He's pushing the CIA to run. Bobby has a vengeful side, and he wants to get even with secret covert actions against Cuba. All of them are failures.
None of these schemes come to very much, but what they do is to convince Castro and his Soviet patrons that the United States is willing to do absolutely anything to reverse the Cuban Revolution.
Khrushchev's summer house is at Pitsunda, Crimea, on the Black Sea. The house is quite luxurious by Soviet standards. The swimming pool has a retractable roof. It's a place to unwind. But something bothers him there. He looks across the sea to the south. Intermediate-range ballistic missiles point at the major cities of the Soviet Union from Turkey. There are American Jupiter missiles on a NATO site. They've been there since the summer of 1961 to shield Europe from the USSR.
Since the time of the Tsars of the 19th century, the Crimea, that's where you spend your summer. There was some sort of a personal attachment to the Black Sea. So Jupiters are in your backyard, not just figuratively, but literally. That's where you spend your vacations. It's difficult to imagine Khrushchev being particularly happy about that.
May 16, 1962, and Khrushchev is visiting Varna, Bulgaria, on the western side of the Black Sea. He makes a speech in which he tells his audience about his irritation at the missiles in Turkey, a neighboring country. They're all a target. Taking a break from his schedule, he goes walking with Rodion Malinovsky, his Minister of Defense. They talk over the issue of the Jupiter missiles again. The Americans can easily strike Moscow.
It's more of an issue of dignity. If the Americans are allowed to have missiles in Turkey, why is it that we, if we're a great power, that we're not allowed to have missiles next to America? That's not reasonable.
I want to show you a picture. I actually have a picture of when he and Malinovsky, when they walk around in Varna in Bulgaria.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have a picture of that, and I found it in my home archives.
Oh, how remarkable is that?
I'm just going to show you.
Well, that's the moment, right?
Right, that's the moment.
That's the moment where
Right.
Khrushchev asks about those
is.
missiles.
In the picture, they seem relaxed. It's a sunny spring day. We don't know exactly what is said on that walk, but Khrushchev has a eureka moment in Varna. He wants to give the Americans a taste of their own medicine. What if he emulates the missile base in Turkey? He could deploy his most threatening weapons to Cuba, just 90 miles off the Florida coast.
The bomb is important because it makes Khrushchev think that the Soviet Union deserves a place of equality with the United States. Why is it that the Americans are allowed to place missiles around the Soviet Union, like, for example, in Turkey or in Italy, and the Soviets are not allowed to do the same in Cuba? It's a matter of equality. If the Soviet Union is an equal superpower, then it must have equal right.
Khrushchev's thinking was, I accepted that, I'm living with that, so probably there will be no big deal, and they will accept that as well.
It will solve another problem. He's falling behind the Americans in the development of long-range nuclear missiles. And crucially, his missiles will protect Cuba from another invasion. He has made his decision. He'll send nuclear missiles to Cuba. On the walk in Varna, he puts it like this to Malinovsky. He wants to toss America a hedgehog down their pants.
Nina, let me just ask you something. It strikes me when I'm looking at the historical documents that Khrushchev is working within a system where he's a member of the Politburo, but he's left out on his own a hell of a lot. It doesn't seem like he can fully trust the other members of the Politburo for advice. And it seems like they're all afraid of opposing him. And so you have this weird dynamic where only a couple of people say to him straight up, this doesn't seem like a good idea. But then when it fails, they all blame Khrushchev. No one takes any risk. It's as though they weren't in the room when any of this was happening.
Well, and this is absolutely correct, because it is, in dictatorial system, it's always like that. The system really doesn't allow for democratic cooperation. And I think the only one person who really spoke against this, not very forcefully still, was Anastas Mikoyan, his closest ally. Andrei Gromyko was doubtful, but he was a foreign minister. He didn't really feel that he had enough strength to speak up to Khrushchev. So yes, but that's what the vertical of power system is like. That is decision of one man, but then all good goes to him, and then all bad also goes to him.
My great-grandfather, Nikita Khrushchev, was single-minded and tough. Since Stalin's death, he has risen steadily up the ranks. By 1962, he's made it to the top. There are now very few people in the Presidium or the Politburo, the top of the party machine, who can question him. In the Kremlin in Moscow, Khrushchev calls a meeting of that elite group. They gather in a grand room. High ceilings, chandeliers, huge oak doors. The palace was built to impress centuries ago by the Tsars of Russia. Now the Soviets use it with the same pomposity. They sit around a long table covered with green felt. It's May 21st, 1962. Khrushchev presents his case. He wants to ship medium and intermediate range missiles to Cuba, armed with nuclear warheads. It will be done in secret and then presented to the Americans as a done deal.
He, on the one hand, still tries to push through his own vision of what has to be done. So his decision already, he made it for himself, to put missiles on Cuba, without really breaking the collective leadership model that they all agreed on after Stalin was removed. But we see that there is less and less collective leadership. And we catch them in May of 1962, exactly at the moment when Khrushchev already packed the entire presidium with his appointees and his supporters, but he still is not in the position to say that, okay, you do this because I told you so.
Khrushchev is like a bulldozer, and he will get his plan through. One of very few people there who can really question Khrushchev is Anastas Mikoyan. He started his career under Lenin. He miraculously survived Stalin. He's an old friend who Khrushchev trusts. Mikoyan has actually visited Cuba and knows Fidel Castro well.
And he has his doubts about the entire Cuban adventure. He doubts that putting the missiles on Cuba would go unnoticed. And he has the political capital to spend to question Khrushchev.
As he talks with Mikoyan, Khrushchev admits that the plan is risky. Mikoyan is concerned it might start a nuclear war, but the rest of the leadership supports Khrushchev or remains silent. The note-taker writes, install nuclear rocket weapons, transport them secretly, disclose later. Khrushchev, however, insists these are defensive, for show, to make a point, not to be used. The plan takes shape. Missiles that could devastate a few American cities would be shipped to Cuba.
They've never had an operation like this, so they decided to proceed in strict secrecy. They call the plan Anadyr, the name of an Arctic river.
A river in the frigid far east of the Soviet Union in Siberia.
So we're in a very cold place,
Right.
and this is to confuse the potential enemies.
Sergei Radchenko shows me what the records in the Russian archives reveal about these meetings.
So this is a letter that is now preserved in the Defense Ministry archives, and you can see that it's handwritten.
Amazing handwriting.
It's a hand, yes, well, very legible. The Soviet military was known for good handwriting, I suppose. But if you go to the final page, so the letter has 7 pages. You can see that it was signed by Malinovsky, who is the Minister of Defense, and by Zakharov, who was the chief of staff effectively. So when they make the decision on May 21st to send missiles to Cuba, then the Ministry of Defense is tasked with preparing the actual operation. They write what they will send. So we're sending a group of Soviet forces from all parts of the army. Then they say, send to Cuba the 43rd Missile Division, and then all the other things that they're sending to Cuba. All of this is listed here. Then they later add a couple of more things. But this is the original plan.
But there are still some doubters. So Khrushchev presents a compromise. Delay the final decision for now, send a delegation to Cuba, ask Castro if he'll accept the missiles, check that the weapons can be kept secret. The delegation includes Sergei Beryuzov. He's just been appointed commander of the missile forces and wants to prove himself.
Beryuzov goes to Cuba. It all looks great and wonderful. It's paradise on earth, right? So he brings from Cuba basically what Khrushchev wanted him to bring. He brings the report that it would be absolutely okay to put the missiles on Cuba. Americans would not notice. That there were palm trees there, that there were palm groves, and they would cover the missiles. That part was not true, at least was wishful thinking. It's not an outright lie, but this is certainly readiness to say yes to the boss.
Beryuzov also has to convince Fidel Castro to accept nuclear weapons. This part of the mission is more difficult.
So when the Soviets offer nuclear weapons to Castro, he's caught off guard. He had been asking his Soviet allies for more conventional weaponry and for a mutual security agreement. He had never really contemplated nuclear weapons, but he had felt very much under attack by the United States and was looking for ways to strengthen his defenses. So when he's offered nuclear weapons, he consults with the rest of the top leadership in Cuba, people like his brother Raul Castro, Che Guevara, President Osvaldo Dorticos, and they try to decide whether it's worth sacrificing some of Cuba's sovereignty to allow the Soviets to station nuclear weapons on Cuban territory. They realized it would look bad that they were beholden to the Soviets.
No to the foreign bases, this is one of his battle cries. And here he turns around and invites a de facto military base there.
Castro adjourns the meeting and consults his comrades. Raul has just learned the missiles are 20 meters long and lets Fidel know his doubts. How can they be concealed? But Fidel returns to the meeting. He accepts to show solidarity with the Soviets, and secondly, to defend Cuba. Operation Anadyr is approved.
Khrushchev gets what he wants. He is in charge.
And so the Soviets in later years would be able to say, oh, Castro asked for it, but Castro would say, no, the Soviets essentially pushed me into doing it.
And so this is brought to a meeting of the Presidium on the 10th of June, 1962, and Khrushchev signs it at the very top. So you can see, he says for, right? Za.
Right.
Za, Khrushchev. And then, well, that's the interesting thing. Then he gets everybody else at the Presidium to sign. So you see Suslov, Brezhnev, this is Brezhnev's signature. So this is his way of basically making sure that everybody's on the same page.
Very Stalin-like.
Very says, oh yes, I signed this and you all signed this and they all signed
all
it.
part of it.
Where's Mikoyan's signature?
Must be. It's always small in the last one.
"85 ships need to be assembled in secret. They'll need to make 184 trips in total. The ships will carry missiles, launchers, and nuclear warheads. The passengers have been told to dress for cold weather, in line with the name of the operation. They assume they're heading north. 40,000 men are on the move, 8,000 miles away to Cuba.